Welcome to the Developing Leaders podcast because leadership isn't optional. It's the only way out of the weeds. We're fractional coaches, Judy Sorrell and myself, and my great colleague, Karen Elliott, two former clinic owners who turned leadership coaches, and we have lived the chaos. We've burned out hard and we've built something even better.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So,
Yeah.
Karen, yeah,
Yeah.
tell me
And
your
we've been
thoughts.
doing this work. Both we were clinic owners for a long time and then doing this work as coaches, helping business owners go from bottlenecked and burnt out to building teams that step up and lead. So I think this podcast is a good one. It is a bit about burnout, in particular women and what we're seeing in the industry right now of people leaving. And yeah, and we talk about what it really takes to develop leaders in your business with real tools, real talk, and a little tough love to help you stop doing it all by yourself.
Yes, that is so
Yeah.
true. And, it's this topic that we're going to talk about today is really involves a lot of different things, culture,
Hmm.
as well as the developing your team as leaders and getting the team on board. But this topic is what is happening? Why are women exiting the workforce and remaining out of the workforce at a record pace?
Hmm.
So there's some interesting data that we're going to share and we're going to discuss, and we'll each share some live examples of what's happened with our clients in this very topic, in this very area. Because Karen and I have dealt with it when we were business owners, but it seems to have just expanded and taken
Hmm.
off. And it's just challenging business owners and leaders and how they can navigate, run their business with this problem. And so I'll let you start out, Karen, and see what you'd like to share with some of the things that you've learned about it.
Yeah, I think it's, as I'm coaching a lot of business owners, this is coming up, more and more in the workplace. And it is women, but it tends to be, everybody involved, but just this shift from really not wanting to work as much and kind of slowly this creep of decreasing hours, cutting shifts, because they want to have things outside their life, which is good. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lesson in there. I mean, you and I mean, we burned the midnight oil and, had I had three kids, you had four, five,
Two kids
two.
and soon to be eight grandkids.
Right. And you wonder, we said this, like, how did we do that? We sacrificed a lot to do that, and I just see that people just aren't willing to do that anymore.
No.
Yeah, and I
And
think what I'm hearing from the owners is like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because we've been told like part-timers kill your business, part-timer. Well,
they
that's what
are.
we're seeing is a lot of people don't want to work, and I think, and the article I think pointed out some really good things. Some of it is financial for
Mhm.
women that have young kids and they have to pay for daycare because it's astronomical, the price. And
Yes,
then they weigh the stress and the work, so they work, and all of that goes to paying for childcare. And I mean,
absolutely.
you got to love what you do and enjoy doing that, but
Yep.
also there's a financial burden I think that people are facing right now in the US and Canada.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this article pointed out, and it's very recent. So it just, last year that 42% identified caregiving responsibilities. And this,
Yeah.
just to your point, the cost of childcare just far exceeded what they were making. And then I remember the stress of having to transport them to here, to there, to that camp,
Yeah.
picking up after school, all these different things.
Yeah.
And it in this day and age, even we're 20, 30 years afterwards, things have become so much more complicated.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think we are dealing with generations that have said, I don't want to work as much. I want the same pay. I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yes.
work as much. I want to reduce my hours so I can have that work-life balance, which can drive up the hair on the back of an owner's neck when those words come out. And there's
Yeah.
positives and negatives to that, isn't there? And
Yeah.
so I think, the number of people that are exiting, the women particularly,
Hmm.
they're the
Hmm.
major caregivers.
Hmm.
And they come into, they're either in the practices and the businesses, and they are saying, I think I need to cut back from full time to three-quarters time.
Yeah.
And what happens in healthcare, and you and I've talked about this, is the owners are in a conundrum
Hmm.
because we want to help support our people and be flexible with their needs, but we also have to meet the needs of a business, especially when you're taking care of patients, and there's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
So, I think this we'll tell some stories from some business owners that we work with as
Hmm.
far as how that actually came about. And then what can we really realistically do with this particular problem that we're facing?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I agree with you with that because I think some of it requires a different way of thinking.
Hmm.
And it's, what got the business owner to the place they're at now in their business and the way they've done things may not be working anymore. And it's also difficult finding, people to work. Like therapists, there's a huge shortage of physiotherapists, and so it's hard to find. And so how do you, do both
Hmm.
without sacrificing the health of the business?
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
is a challenge. And how do you put your people first, but also in the best interest not only of them but the business, as we're
Yeah,
saying? And
yeah.
so I think our discussion today is really going to talk about recognizing and acknowledging that that's a real thing. You brought up a really good point. Maybe the way we did it when we first started the business is not the way that it needs to continue to be done. Otherwise, you may just end up with a revolving door.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this is where it becomes so important as a business owner to know your numbers.
Yes.
And I think that I'll give you a first kind of example
Sure.
story. I had a clinic owner in my group coaching call, and she has, front of the house staff, administration at the front, and hired somebody who they were hired for full time. And then over the last several months, they've decreased their hours. And now they've wanting 20 hours. And she said, how do I do that? Because that person was hired for 35 hours a week.
Yes.
And I said, well, she said, we've been okay, but the recent ask for 20 hours really puts us in a bind.
Hmm.
So I said, you need to know, how many admin do you need at your maximum capacity of therapists?
Yes.
So if this chunk of hours requires two people on the front all the time, then that may be when you say, okay, then these are the hours that you can work. I'm going to say yes to your 20. However, these are the hours because this is the busiest, and we can do all right with only one person on the bookends,
Yep.
right? Where there's less therapists. So you really do need to know your numbers, how busy you are when you require this number
Yes.
of front end staff, and then you get into a negotiation. I can
Yep.
say, yes to your request for decrease. However, that comes with a change in hours
Yes.
because I have to run the business and I know I need two people on the front between these hours and this hours. The rest, we're okay.
And that leads the conversation of compromise. How do you
Yes.
both compromise so it's a win-win? And but you're right, you've got to know the numbers, which is not just KPIs, but all the numbers that impact the business, which is what you're
Yeah.
describing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so important. And I think, the other thing that I use with leaders and owners is I have this set of uh, basically staycation, if you will, the questions that they will then, what are they doing to stay there, whether it's during a vacation or long term? And it's to open up those questions that allow people to say, yes, this is what's keeping me here, but
Mm,
this is why I would leave.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and that does get down to the key motivators, as we talked about the culture, what's driving your people will change from time to time. And
Yeah.
so I think you have to sit down and have that type of conversation, but tying it back to knowing the numbers, as you have said, is
Yeah.
really important. We
Yeah.
as business owners and leaders cannot be afraid to have those difficult conversations, but you have
Yeah.
to have
And I
that
think it's,
information.
again, also knowing your people. Like, I love
Yes.
that. Having, we always talk about doing an exit interview. Like, why are we not doing stay interviews?
Mm-hmm.
Like, regularly, and especially if somebody on your team has gone through a change in a season of life. They
Yes.
came into your business as a single person, then they got married. Well, that's a new season. Now they have kids. Well, that's a new season. All
Mm,
those reasons are going to change with those
absolutely.
seasons. So we have to be so aware of where our people are at and have those conversations. You're in a different phase of
Yeah.
life. What's changed for you when I asked you the reasons for why you'd stay? Has
Yep.
anything changed?
Yep. Yep.
So get ahead of it so you're not having an exit interview.
That's being proactive.
Yeah. I really
And
love that. Yeah.
yeah, and what happens is we tend to be reactive, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we're so busy just running the business and doing everything else, we forget about those little things that are so important, and they prevent that type of exiting. I'll share a story of the team that I work with on a regular basis, and I was with them last week. We work all week together, and I walked into a situation, it wasn't negative, but it was a prime example of exactly what we're talking about. Um, Several of the providers were requesting day after day, they would go into the office manager and request that their schedule be changed. And
Mm.
then 4 out of 5 of them were doing this. And it wasn't anything that was negative or for that reason adversarial, but it created oh my gosh, the owner needed to step back and say, these people have been with me for a long time. They are having certain personal issues that need to be addressed. And so they immediately looked at all the 5 clinical positions that they had and said, what can we do with all of these 5 positions so that the number of hours that we're losing actually equals 1 position? So, how do we then go in
Mhm.
and restructure the hours and the expectations for those hours, just like you were talking about?
Mhm.
This was already done before I got there, so I was really proud of them for
Wow.
doing
Yeah.
this. Yep. And so they went in and were able to craft the schedule for the 5 clinicians
Mhm.
that were part of that department and make sure that everybody had the time that they needed to reduce their hours,
Mhm.
knowing that they may want to come back later and full time, and that those hours may not be there. Their
Yeah.
practice could absorb that reduction, but they didn't know if, as they shifted things around and streamlined, they weren't sure that they would have to regain that position again or reemploy that
Mhm.
position. Interesting, wasn't it?
Wow. That's so interesting because I think there's so many gems there because first of all, the owner recognizing that, bringing people together
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that, first of all, like we can't have this inconsistent changing because that's a puts an extra workload on the front desk person or
Yeah.
administrator to change the schedule, and the patients are affected.
Oh, totally.
So that inconsistency is not good for business.
Nope.
So if this is the rhythm and this is the trend and the norm, then we have to at least be consistent. If you need to cut back, then that's consistent.
Yes,
And then to know that that is now one position, we are okay, but actually we all, or then we will be hiring, just so you know. And if you want to increase your shift again, that's okay, but you may not have the same patient load.
that's right.
So
And
setting those boundaries and those guardrails in order to say yes, but also
exactly.
it's not guaranteed, but I'm willing to support you.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And I think what happened is the beauty about the work that we do to develop leaders, Karen,
Hmm.
that's what led to the culture that drove this decision.
Hmm.
And yeah, I've been working with this team for quite a while. So we've developed their leads. They're major leaders. They had no leaders. I've developed the leaders, and they then in turn take on the responsibility to manage and oversee these things. The owner made the ultimate decision that it was okay to craft this schedule the way it is and redo it. But it's the leaders that were developed that had the confidence to step in,
Hmm.
find the solutions that helped everyone else, but and also did not hurt the business.
Yeah, yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
good.
that's why we do what we do with developing leaders and developing the staff in order to be
Yes.
self-sufficient, self-driven, and accountable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And the
so,
willingness to have the conversation. I think quite often what ends up happening is we see this and then resentment builds and nobody has the conversation,
right.
right? And then it creates chaos. But they recognize a different pattern and said, whoa, 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 I think we all need to have a conversation about this and figure out how we want to move and forward if this is the new norm. And this is, yeah,
Yes. And how many times have you seen with business owners and that somebody, another employee gets this special accommodation for their hours, but it hasn't been discussed with the rest of the team. So the rest of the team says, well, that's not fair.
yeah,
They get to do this or do that. This didn't happen. It normally can happen like that, but they
yeah,
brought it together as a whole team and said, okay, everyone is having this request and this issue. What do we do with it as a unit, as a department?
yeah, yeah.
And that's what the leaders did that are now in those positions.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. That's really what needs to happen, isn't it? To
It
have the,
is.
because it affects the team and that's the whole thing. This is going to affect everybody, so let's
Yes.
talk about it. And
Yep.
how we can come up with a plan or decision
Yep.
to do this or not. Like sometimes
Exactly.
the answer is
Sometimes
no.
the answer is no.
Sometimes it's still
Yep.
no.
And the knee jerk response of a lot of business owners, I speak for myself a long time ago,
Yeah.
is no, we can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
And
and
then
I
you
would,
end up losing that person,
oh,
right?
totally did.
Yeah. But I think you still need to have your minimum, kind of your minimum standard of what, this is
Mm-hmm.
kind of the minimum. I'm okay.
Yep.
We can work within here, but anything less than or anything it's
It's
not
not
going to work.
acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's more,
Yeah.
and that gets to one of the solutions that this article kind of addresses is the flexibility piece,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how do you in a healthcare dental business carve in flexibility
Hmm.
to for your employees to flex their hours or change those things, and you have to create expectations around that particular request as you said, and you can't
Yeah.
keep like the example you gave, the front office person started at 35, now they're going down to 20. Well, perhaps, and you wouldn't think of it, hindsight's 2020, but at the
Hmm.
beginning that might be something that needs to be said to the business owner about this position may have some flexibility in it, but there are boundaries about how many hours. Do that
Yeah.
up front.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think when we look at change in the way we look, that might be something that becomes part of that initial conversation
Yes.
when somebody's onboarded and hired for these
Yep.
roles, and then have that, we recognize that things change, but we
Absolutely.
also are here to, in a healthcare business to, service as many patients as we can. And when we drop below this, it starts to affect our patient care. And then they
Yes.
don't get the results, right? So I think putting, I call them guardrails, but that,
Yep.
or
Yep.
boundaries, whichever word you want to use around that. I think I like guardrails because it's a little bit more flexible.
I do too. And you know what else that we haven't really addressed, which I think is important, um, because we both have experienced it ourselves and with our clients, is that not only the people that work for us, but now we're interviewing people,
Hmm.
trying to fill positions or attract people to a position that comes in with their expectation of their hours and or pay, but
Yeah.
specifically we're talking about hours. How do you deal with that?
I think you address the elephant in the room. Like I would ask, is there any things that you can think of that may
Yes.
cause you to want to decrease these hours? And
Yes.
just have it up front.
Yes. I agree. Yep.
And then you've had the conversation, say, okay, that's fair. I'm asking because life happens.
Hmm.
So that's good to know. And then you can talk about the ability to be flexible as a business owner, but also have that standard, knowing what I know with my numbers. This is the minimum standard that I need to have in order to service patient care consistently
Yes.
and have a healthy business.
Yes. And I think that's such an important part of the hiring and the interviewing because you're laying it out on the table and
Yeah,
people and when we have so much trouble recruiting and hiring, we tend to shy away from that type of conversation because we don't want to
yeah,
scare people off. And that all that does is get in big trouble down the road.
yeah,
So it really, yes, I've been there
yeah.
before and I'm sure you have too. And I think having that type of conversation is really important, but it relies on knowing numbers, knowing that the position is well defined.
Hmm. Yeah,
Does and that the expectations define that position as well as the behavioral expectations that go along with it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and it's a challenge when we run into that because people say, "Well, I want to be able to." They almost want to. They almost want to be able to come and go as they please.
yeah. Well, kind of. That's what I'm hearing, certainly,
I am
is
too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
and
so, how do you define that and call it out and say, a
yeah,
lot of people want to come and go as they please. They want their own hours. They want to be independent. We want you to be independent, but here are the boundaries, here are the guardrails, or however
yeah,
you want to, that allow you to build in some flexibility, but still be honestly true to the business as well.
yeah. And I think it requires, explaining a little bit about how the business side of it works
Mm-hmm.
because they're not an owner and they don't know. And I think it's okay to talk about, there's a certain amount of money that needs to come in order to simply
Yes.
keep the lights on and operate the
Yep.
business, but also I have X number of other mortgages that I have to pay for. So I do need to be responsible and knowing those numbers. I know that I have to have,
Yep.
this many hours. So I think those conversations need to be had earlier.
Yes, they do. And they need to be had without asking questions that you can't ask on an interview.
Yes. Yeah.
those
Yeah.
those particular types, so you can get a feel for what people really want. And I just think you don't want them just to come in and be a warm body to fill a spot.
No. No.
You want them to be able to fit into the culture of the business and have the same values, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the scheduling flexibility probably for me is the top item that owners and leaders really need to wrap their arms around.
Yeah.
And that people talk about, larger companies do have policies to support employee caregiving and things like that, but small to medium sized businesses, they can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's not really an option, if you will. And the
Mhm.
other thing they talked about in this article, of course, the regular payouts, but pay audits, so looking what people are getting paid, and that's a whole nother conversation in itself.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things that they identified was this gap that 20% of women who stayed in their jobs worked at companies lacking flexible options versus 40% who left worked for employers who refused to offer flexible scheduling. So it tells you they're willing to walk away
Yes,
from an
exactly.
income
Yes.
because of lack of flexibility.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, I see that as the number one thing, more
Yeah.
so than pay and things.
Yeah.
Yes, affordability is it, but if you aren't willing to even hear, listen, or work with employees on the reasonable
Yeah.
flexibility pieces, then people will feel like they're not being heard.
Yeah. And then I think it goes into we talk about retention, patient retention, but staff retention right
Oh,
now, I mean, it's expensive when you lose somebody.
oh yeah. Oh
right?
yeah.
So it becomes a retention strategy to us again with your guardrails. You
Hmm.
know, you're not going to get walked over, but you need to be clear on what that looks like and where the autonomy is and where the flexibility is within this and where it's not,
Yes.
in order to retain staff, especially good staff.
Oh man, and that's the most important thing is to focus on that. So, I think as we look at this overall message that we're sending is, um, yes, women are leaving the workforce and they are driving the conversation around schedule and
Hmm.
flexibility.
Hmm.
So, what can business owners and leaders do to preempt this, to be proactive about it, so
Hmm.
that they can keep and attract their key players, but also not honestly burn out themselves at
Yeah.
trying to keep things going in the best interest of keeping people at their part-time schedules, because that can be
Yes.
easy to do for an owner. They will
Yeah.
fall prey to that to keep their numbers up and going. And I think it's
Yeah.
so knowing what the position is, defining the position,
Hmm.
knowing the numbers, and be willing to have those conversations that are crucial to have at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. At the beginning, and then recognizing, is this a pattern in your business right now? And how are you going to address it? And I think
Yep.
that conversation, bring the team together. This is what we're seeing. We need all hands on deck to
Yep.
figure out how best to navigate this. And I think it requires healthy conflict because you're going to
Yes.
have, to
Yes.
come up with a plan that works for everybody, knowing that we have to run a healthy business and be flexible and also be willing to say no if it doesn't fall within those guardrails of where you're able to stay.
Yes.
But
And and I think, the point that you keep expressing and hitting on is so important. We have to have continual conversation with each other about this.
yeah,
Engagement. Take the time to sit down and have that engagement one on one with a team, but open it up because the owner needs to be transparent and vulnerable to
hmm,
start that positive back and forth engagement.
yeah. Versus, hearing just the anger and the complaints that this is happening.
Uh,
Like it's not a one-time thing. It's now a pattern, and
no.
the research shows that this is happening. So
Yes.
instead of complaining about it, being angry about, and labeling,
Yep.
there's a lot of labeling. They're lazy, this, other things that they're labeling. You're going to have to solve the problem because
Yes.
this article has indicated that this is true. This is happening. It's
Yes.
been measured. And I don't see this going away.
And it's in all industries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if owners can do one thing, it's to step back and say, what can I do with this position? What's the bottom line?
Yeah.
And how do I have a conversation with this potential employee or the key employee that's part of my business that is requesting this shift? I
Yeah.
need to have that conversation, and how do I have it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so
No,
that's great.
very, very relevant topic. You had an experience with and I had the question on the coaching
Yeah.
call, and I see this a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and we hear it a lot.
Yeah. And it
Um,
can be worse if we look at like if you don't address this, it starts to affect your culture because other people say, "What do you mean? Like, why does that person get to change their schedule and they're
exactly.
here, they're not, and it's affecting me because now I have to see their patients." And then
Yep.
it just can create this snowball effect of really damaging your culture.
Yeah, one of the things I'll share one other story is um my husband would always tell me, because of, being in medicine as well, that the women who would request this part-time positions, the men in that were the partners carried the load.
Mm,
So she would be off for either maternity or just go to part time, and the men continue to work full time. But who picked up the load? The full
mm,
timers.
yeah. Yeah.
So we business owners
Yeah.
need to be really mindful of that.
Yeah. And I think
So,
in those meetings too, that's like, who are all that we have to, who is this going to affect? And really list everybody because
yep,
it's a trickle effect.
you
So we have
bet
to look at the whole team. That's why it's a team problem. It's not
it
an
is.
individual problem, it's a team
It
problem.
is. And
Yeah.
it needs to be discussed as a team.
Yeah. Yes.
That's, yeah. So, and that's why this team that I work with has solved it themselves. They used to not do that, but because they considered it an all team
Mhm.
problem and they addressed it as such.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. Anything else to add, Karen? It's a great topic.
It's a great talk, very relevant. I think very the awareness around it, I think, is key, and to start
Mm-hmm.
talking about it in your business with your team if this is what you're experiencing,
Yes.
because I don't think it's going away. So,
It don't be afraid to step
yeah.
forth and say, I have a situation that I need to run by all of you, and
Hmm.
I need your help solving it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
vulnerability for a leader. So that's
Yeah.
great. So,
Amazing.
gosh, I think we covered everything that we want people to take away from
I hope
today.
so. Yeah.
I think
I
so.
hopefully we can post the article so people can have a read of it as
I would
well.
like to. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
like to. So I think it would be important for them to look at it because it is current, even though it's last
Yeah.
year, it's relative, it's current.
Yeah.
And I think, we like to use these concepts and tools in developing leaders.
Hmm.
So, I think you take this episode and we will return next month with
Hmm.
another topic that really helps you maybe take your team to a different level, take yourself to a different level. It just gives you a
Yeah.
perspective of this is reality. What do we do with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
what
why we're doing this is to bring that awareness
it is.
and if you take one thing from this, then that's a win. And
That
even
is
if it's
totally
just
correct.
the awareness, like, oof, it's not something I considered. That's good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the way to handle it is pretty simple. You just have to ask
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
listen. So
Yeah.
thank you, Karen.
Good.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all for joining us. We will see you next month on another episode of
Yeah.
Developing Leaders Podcast.
See you next month.
Bye.